The auction hall on Station Meridian 7 smelled of ozone and recycled air. Captain David Ross stood among 200 alien dignitaries, his worn jacket looking shabby next to their ceremonial robes and gleaming exoskeletons. He hadn't meant to attend this gathering. He'd only docked for fuel and perhaps a decent meal that didn't come from a ration pack. The auctioneer, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like polished marble, gestured toward a transparent case at the center of the room. Inside rested a sword, its blade catching the light in ways that seemed to defy physics. The metal appeared silver at one angle, deep bronze at another, and occasionally flashed with colors that had no name in any human language. "Behold the Torch of Ascension," the auctioneer announced, his translator rendering the words in a dozen languages simultaneously. "Forged in the core of a dying star by the architects themselves. For 3,000 cycles, it has rested in the Temple of First Light. Only one chosen by the divine may lift it from its pedestal." David watched as the crowd murmured with reverence. Several beings pressed their appendages together in what he recognized as prayer gestures across multiple species. The bid started at 1,000,000 credits, a sum that could buy a small moon in some systems. "This is absurd," David muttered to himself. He'd seen this show before on a dozen different worlds. Sacred artifacts that turned out to be elaborate fakes. Ancient weapons that were really just 300 years old. He'd learned to spot the signs during his years, hauling cargo across the rim territories. The bidding climbed higher. 2 million. 5 million. The beings in the room seemed desperate to own the blade, though none could explain precisely why they wanted it beyond vague statements about destiny and cosmic purpose. A robed figure near the front stood, silencing the crowd with a gesture. David recognized the markings of a high priest from the Covenant of Eternal Sons, one of the largest religious orders spanning 40 systems. The priest's voice resonated through the hall without need for electronic amplification. "This blade is not meant for purchase," the priest declared. "It is a test, a trial set forth by the architects to identify the next bearer of light. Whosoever can lift the torch from its case shall be recognized as divinely chosen, fit to lead the faithful across the stars." The crowd erupted in excited chatter. The auctioneer seemed pleased with this development, probably calculating how much more attention and credits this would bring to his establishment. "However," the priest continued, raising one elongated finger, "let all present understand the cost of failure. 7 beings have attempted to claim the torch in the past millennium. 7 beings have been reduced to ash where they stood. The divine does not suffer the unworthy." A hush fell over the assembly. David noticed several bidders quietly backing toward the exits. He couldn't blame them. Whether through engineered defense systems or some genuine cosmic horror, he had no interest in being reduced to a small pile of carbon. The priest approached the case with measured steps. The crowd parted before him like water. He placed both hands on the transparent surface and began chanting in a language that predated most civilizations in the known galaxy. The case responded, panels sliding apart with a hiss of escaping gas. Inside, the blade rested on a pedestal of dark stone. Up close, David could see intricate patterns etched into the metal, symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when observed directly. Despite his skepticism, he felt something emanating from the weapon. Not quite heat, not quite electricity, but a presence that made his teeth ache. The priest reached toward the hilt, then hesitated. "I am humbled," he said, withdrawing his hand. "The time is not yet right. The divine shall make itself known." He stepped back, gesturing to the assembled crowd. "Let any who feel the call come forward." Nobody moved. Minutes passed in uncomfortable silence. David considered leaving. He had cargo to deliver on Outpost Tango, and this circus was eating into his profit margins. But something kept him rooted in place, a nagging familiarity he couldn't quite identify. Then he saw it. A small mark near the base of the blade, almost hidden by the ornate crossguard. 3 parallel lines forming a triangle. His breath caught in his throat. "No way," he whispered. He'd seen that mark before. Not in some ancient text or religious manuscript. He'd seen it stamped on the bottom of a ceramic mug he'd bought at a flea market on Earth. The same mark appeared on cheap furniture from a discount chain that had gone bankrupt 15 years ago. It was a manufacturer's logo, specifically from a company called Trimark Industries that had specialized in reproductions and novelty items. David pushed through the crowd, ignoring the protests of beings twice his size. The priest turned to regard him with an expression that might have been surprise or contempt, difficult to tell with alien facial structures. "Human," the priest said, making the word sound like an insult. "You dare approach the torch of ascension?" "I dare," David replied, stopping at the edge of the pedestal. "Mind if I take a closer look?" The priest's robes rustled with what might have been indignation. "Only gods may raise that blade from its rest. Are you claiming divinity, human?" David ignored the question and leaned in to examine the weapon more closely. The craftsmanship was impressive. He'd give them that. The metal had been treated to create that color-shifting effect, probably using some kind of nano-coating. The symbols etched into the surface were beautifully rendered, even if they were complete nonsense. He recognized a few characters from various alphabets, jumbled together in aesthetically pleasing but meaningless combinations. "Remarkable work," he said, reaching for the hilt. The crowd gasped. Several beings began chanting prayers. The priest grabbed David's shoulder with surprising strength. "Stop, fool," the priest hissed. "You will be destroyed. The unworthy cannot survive contact with divine fire." David shrugged off the grip and wrapped his fingers around the handle. The metal felt cool against his palm, slightly textured. He lifted the blade from the pedestal in one smooth motion, expecting weight, but finding it surprisingly light. Probably aluminum alloy with a decorative coating. The blade came free with a soft click, like a magnet releasing. No divine fire consumed him. No cosmic judgment struck him down. He stood there holding the sword, feeling slightly ridiculous, while 200 alien beings stared in absolute silence. The priest stumbled backward, his face cycling through emotions David couldn't identify. "Impossible," the priest breathed. The prophecies spoke of trials, of worthiness proven through sacrifice. "You simply took it." David turned the blade over in his hands, examining the construction. "Yeah, about that," he said. "I hate to break it to you, but this isn't some ancient divine weapon." "Heresy," someone in the crowd shouted. "No, seriously," David continued, pointing at the base of the blade. "See this mark? That's from Trimark Industries, a company based out of New Jersey. They made reproduction swords, decorative pieces for people who wanted something that looked impressive hanging on their wall. This particular model was called the Celestial Blade, retailed for about 49 credits, though I've seen them in clearance bins for less." The priest's expression hardened. "You lie. The torch has existed for millennia, since before your species learned to harness fire." "Did it, though?" David asked. "Or did someone find one of these replicas, see how impressive it looked, and decide to build a religion around it? Happens more often than you'd think. I once met a cult on Kepler 22b that worshipped a broken food processor they thought was an oracle. He held the blade up to the light, letting the crowd see the manufacturing mark clearly. Several beings pushed forward to examine it, their certainty beginning to crack. The auctioneer had gone very quiet, probably calculating his losses. "The defense system," someone called out. 7 have died attempting to claim the blade. "Show me the records," David challenged. "Real documentation, not just stories." "Because I'm betting those 7 either never existed." or they died from a very conventional security system designed to protect what everyone thought was priceless. The priest seemed to deflate, his robes hanging loose on his frame. "If this is true," he said quietly, "then everything we have built, everything we have believed—" "Look," David interrupted, his voice gentler now. "I'm not trying to destroy your faith. Maybe the divine works in mysterious ways. Maybe the architects intended for you to find meaning in this thing, regardless of where it actually came from. That's between you and whatever you believe in." He offered the blade back to the priest, who stared at it as if seeing it for the first time. After a long moment, the priest took it, his hands trembling slightly. "But maybe," David continued, "the lesson here is that divinity doesn't need special props. If your faith requires magical swords and ancient prophecies to have meaning, then it wasn't very strong to begin with." The crowd had begun to disperse. Some angry, others confused, a few laughing at the absurdity of the situation. The auctioneer was already fielding complaints and demands for refunds. David figured it was time to make his exit before someone decided to blame him for shattering their worldview. As he reached the door, the priest called out to him, "Human, what is your name?" "David Ross, captain of the freighter Wayward Star." The priest nodded slowly. "Captain Ross, you have given me much to contemplate. Perhaps TH